The wind screamed like a thing in pain, dragging clouds of irradiated ash through the skeletal remains of what once was an industrial megahive. Towers, now twisted and half swallowed by earthquakes, leaned like dying trees over the wasteland. Kyle moved through it with the practiced caution of a man who knew better than to trust even the ground beneath him. His boots crunched over broken glass and bone, soaked in chemical rain that hissed where it touched exposed metal. Every breath through his rebreather tasted of rust and decay. Above, the sky flickered with lightning, not natural, but born of atmospheric instability. The dead zone lived up to its name, a swath of land where life had lost all claim, poisoned by biowarfare fallout and corporate geoweapons decades old. Humanity had moved on in theory, but for scavengers like Kael, the dead zone still whispered promises of tech no one else dared to recover. His scanner blinked erratically. Radiation levels spiked and dipped like a malfunctioning heart. Power surges beneath the rubble teased the edges of his readings. The terrain was shifting again, slow seismic murmurs echoing through his boots. Somewhere deep below, the earth plotted its next violent exhale, but Kael pressed on. The wreckage of old Sinter Core was too valuable to pass up. Maybe today he'd find a processor that hadn't been slagged, or a fusion cell with a few minutes of charge. He ducked beneath a bent girder, wincing as acid rain dribbled onto the seal of his hood. One drop could dissolve skin. Several could ruin a month's worth of filtration. His mind wandered only briefly, long enough to remember why he kept doing this, long enough to remember the graves left behind. And then something glinted through the sludge. Kael froze. The glint wasn't metal scrap or shattered glass. It moved barely, just a twitch, but enough. He swept his scanner toward the glow, expecting some bio-warped animal, maybe one of the crawlies that survived off radiation and flesh. Instead, half submerged in a viscous stream of toxic runoff, lay a figure. It was humanoid, roughly, but that was where the similarities ended. The armor was like nothing Kael had ever seen. Silver white, patterned with fractal etchings that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Cracks ran through the plates, leaking something that steamed violently in the rain. One arm stretched toward the bank, the fingers clawed in frozen desperation. He waited closer, carefully. The figure's helmet was shattered, revealing a face too symmetrical to be human, with skin that shimmered faintly under the ash. It was female, he thought, or close to it. Hair like liquid chrome clung to her skull, slicked back by blood and chemical foam. She wasn't breathing, except there, a faint rise of her chest, uneven and ragged, the gasp of someone too stubborn to die. Every part of Kael screamed at him to back away. This wasn't a person. This was alien, possibly military, definitely dangerous. Humanity had treaties, warnings etched into history in mass graves, in orbital burns. Aliens didn't just fall into the dead zone by accident. And yet here she was, half dead, alone, unguarded. He stared a moment longer, then reached for her arm. The armor hissed at his touch, reacting to the contaminant. But it didn't stop him. She didn't wake. And something, perhaps madness, perhaps mercy, drove him to pull her free. Her body was heavier than it looked, slick with runoff and almost limp. Kael grunted as he hoisted her over his shoulders, legs trembling as his boots fought for purchase in the sludge. Alarms chirped inside his helmet. Biocontaminant exposure, rising rad count, filtration breach in less than 12 minutes. He cursed under his breath and moved faster. He didn't have long. The shelter wasn't far, an old mag transport tunnel buried beneath collapsed streets, reinforced with scavenged steel and ceramic plating. He'd been using it for weeks, and with every tremor, he expected to find it caved in. But luck, or something like it, held. He forced the rusted hatch open with his boot, ducked inside and slammed it shut behind him. Darkness wrapped around them like a shroud. The air was stale but dry. A generator sputtered to life as he slapped the ignition pad, bringing the faint glow of emergency lights. He dropped her onto a field cot, panting, sweat stinging his eyes. Up close, she looked worse. Burns marred her skin beneath the armor. Her pulse flickered, erratic. He didn't know her species, didn't know what stable looked like, but unconscious and twitching was probably bad. Kael opened his medical kit and hesitated. No manual for this. He ran a sterilizer over her wounds anyway, patched the armor cracks with sealant foam, and hooked a salvage drip line into what he hoped was a vein. It took. Her breathing steadied, barely. Her eyes didn't open. Kael sat back, soaked in ash and rain, and stared at the impossible stranger. He didn't know what he'd just pulled into his world, but something told him it wasn't done with him yet. The hours crawled past in silence, broken only by the groan of shifting earth above. Kael slept in snatches, always with one eye on her. She didn't move, until she did. It started with a flicker. Her armor pulsed, brighter than before. The etchings shifted like a living tattoo, flowing around wounds, guiding regeneration. Her chest plate clicked open along microscopic seams, revealing a core of soft light nested where a heart might be. Kael leaned closer, mesmerized and uneasy. Then she inhaled, long and deep, like surfacing from a nightmare. Her eyes opened, casting pale gold light across the room. They locked onto Kael, and for a moment he saw no fear, only confusion and recognition. She tried to speak. No sound came. Kael reached for water, but her hand darted out, fast despite her condition. She gripped his wrist, not in aggression, but desperation. Her skin was warm, too warm. Then her armor interfaced with his gear. His scanner beeped wildly, struggling to parse alien code. Strings of untranslated glyphs poured across the screen. And then, in broken script, Solari, Lightborn, last of the Veil. Kael's stomach turned cold. The Solari were myth, extinct, wiped out during the Reconciliation Wars. Humanity hadn't seen one in over a century. The official record called them a casualty of war, but soldiers told stories of entire battalions lost to a single Solari warrior. Light wielders, ethereal, merciless. This one didn't look merciless now. She looked like a relic, a dying ember, and Kael had just dragged the last of her kind into the heart of a zone meant to erase everything. Sleep didn't come again. At dawn, what passed for it in the sulfur-choked sky, Kael left her resting and returned to the crash site. The rain had slowed but left deep scars in the terrain. Mudslides had buried most of the wreckage, but he found it, a fragment of her vessel half swallowed by rubble. Something within pulsed faintly. He dug with gloved hands until they bled. A transmitter. It hummed when he touched it, recognizing something in his biology, or hers imprinted on him. The glyphs flared. A holographic projection blinked to life, showing a spiral of stars and a single sigil surrounded by runes. Treaty Enclave 7. Peace Accord validated. Kael staggered back. This wasn't a beacon. It was a black box, a diplomatic marker, legal proof of status. And humanity had just broken every rule in the book by shooting her down. If they had shot her down. If. He remembered the old rumors, how factions inside the Union command wanted the Solari gone for good, how peace had loopholes carved in blood. If someone in power knew she was alive, the implications chilled him more than the cold. Back in the shelter, she was sitting up, barely. Her voice rasped through cracked lips. Why? Help me. He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he showed her the transmitter. And for the first time, she looked afraid. Kael's radio crackled to life before he could question her. A burst of static cleared to a cold, mechanical voice. Sweep Team Theta, en route. Unidentified Solari signal acquired. Approaching coordinates 43.8 degrees south. Intercept in 23 minutes. He stared at the readout. They were coming. The scanner pulsed. 3 inbound craft. No call sign. No Union flag. Private interceptors. Black ops. The kind of team sent to disappear problems, not solve them. She saw it on his face before he spoke. She stood staggering, but upright. The light beneath her skin flared again, brighter now. Strength returning, fear sharpening into resolve. They'll kill you, she said. Probably, he replied. Outside, thunder cracked like artillery. The ash winds returned, hurling clouds across the broken skyline. His shelter would not hold against orbital scans. If they found her here, it was over. She looked at the door, then at him. You could give me up. He almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he opened a hidden panel and pulled out an old Union field disruptor. Ancient, illegal, but functional. "No one dies in my shelter," he said. She stared at him a moment longer, then nodded. Above them, the sky screamed as the hunters drew near. The room pulsed with heat before Kael even noticed she'd stirred. A high-pitched whine vibrated through the shelter's plating, like the hum of a reactor nearing overload. He turned. Too late. Elyra stood, limbs trembling but eyes wide open, golden light bleeding from her irises like molten fire. Her armor had reformed partially, latticework stitching over her core. The fractured pieces hovered near her shoulders, drawn by instinct or command, vibrating in a defensive halo. Kael took a single step forward. It was a mistake. The light flared. Psionic shockwaves rippled outward, warping metal, cracking the support beam behind him. The lights died. The air became thick, buzzing with raw energy. Kael's vision blurred, his thoughts tangled. Something clawed at his mind. Not a voice, but a scream. She saw him through fractured memory and primal instinct. Human silhouette, masked, armored, just like the ones who had pulled her from the sky. Executioners in diplomacy's skin. Her kind had trusted once. Never again. She raised her hand. The field reactor in the corner screeched as its containment began to fail. Sparks erupted from the walls. Kael didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't speak. He only pulled back his hood, letting her see his face fully. Filthy, lined, raw with exhaustion. A face that didn't belong to killers. A face that hadn't slept in days. She hesitated. The hum faltered. Her knees buckled. She collapsed into his arms, the fire in her eyes dimming to embers. When the lights flickered back on, the shelter was silent again, except for the crackle of shorted wiring and the ragged breath of two souls unsure what came next. Elyra sat against the wall, still pale, still wary. Kael crouched a few meters away, far enough not to provoke. His hands rested on his thighs, palms open. No sudden moves. "Scavenger?" Her voice was jagged stone across old metal. "Or soldier?" Kael didn't answer right away. He unfastened his jacket, revealing the layers beneath. Tattered patchwork fabric, scavenged plating, and along both hands a history carved in scars. Acid burns, shrapnel, a fusion weld that had gone wrong. Survival, not combat. "Soldiers don't dig through corpse zones for copper," he said finally. She didn't lower her guard, but her gaze shifted, just slightly. The tension in her limbs eased a degree. "Your kind. They shot me down." "My kind. Maybe," Kael said. "I didn't." Her expression didn't soften, but something behind it cracked, a fracture in certainty. The stories she had been told about humans were painted in extremes, savage, relentless, betrayers of treaties and destroyers of worlds. But this one had risked exposure, carried her through acid rain, patched her with hands that trembled from exhaustion rather than hatred. Still, trust was not a switch. It was a fault line, and her world had already split once. "So what are you, Kael of Earth?" He considered that, then shrugged. "Stupid," he said, "or desperate." She almost smiled. Kael noticed the whine first, a subtle pitch beneath the hum of his generator. Her armor vibrated with an uneven frequency, like a system compensating for a deeper failure. When he approached, she didn't stop him. Just watch, too tired to protest. His scanner confirmed it. Her core, an organ of living biometal fused to her physiology, was destabilizing. The energy matrix inside flickered like a dying star. Pulses that should have been synchronized were staggered. Whatever had powered her kind, whatever technology made them more than biological, was collapsing. "How bad?" she asked, not looking at him. "Without a stabilizer? Fatal. A cycle, maybe less." She looked away. "So I die anyway." Kael didn't answer. The armor at her sternum hummed quietly, a sound almost like lullaby tones, modulated through dying systems. She laid a hand over it. Her people had called the core the soul light. It wasn't just tech. It was memory, history, a lifetime encoded in light and will, and it was dying with her. "Solari tech's rare. Kael said gently. But I've heard rumors, ruins, abandoned consulates, one about 50 clicks west. Her eyes flicked toward him again, disbelief etched in every line of her face. You'd walk into another death zone. For me? No, he said. For the story I'll tell when I'm older. That time she did smile. Just a little. The acid storms didn't wait for permission. By the time Kael reached the ridge above the shelter, the sky had darkened into a bruised tapestry of green and charcoal. Lightning danced through the clouds in horizontal streaks, carried by winds powerful enough to flay exposed skin. He wrapped himself in a patched tarp, goggles cinched tight, breath rasping behind a double filter. Each step west took him deeper into land the maps had given up on. Satellite feeds went dark here. Drone recon died mid-flight. Even the scavenger forums whispered curses about the place. But the rumor had stuck with him for years. A derelict Solari consulate buried under the ruins of an old terraforming node. Once a sanctuary for diplomatic envoys. Abandoned before the wars ended. Supposedly intact. The terrain fought him. Mud as thick as concrete sucked at his boots. Jagged steel jutted from collapsed overpasses, sharp as guilt. Acid rain hissed against his tarp, burning small holes faster than he could patch them. His sidearm jammed twice, the metal swelling from moisture. Yet he pressed on. Every kilometer stripped away a layer of comfort, leaving only willpower. Somewhere out here, the last thread of hope for a dying alien flickered in the dark. He didn't know why it mattered so much, just that it did. By the time he reached the broken silhouette of the consulate, half submerged, crusted in ash and fungus, his legs were numb, the structure's core still hummed, faint and ancient, and waiting. The consulate's interior smelled of ozone and decay. Glyphs pulsed faintly along the walls, reacting to his presence. Most of the structure had collapsed inward, but a few chambers remained intact. Kael moved slowly, scanning for traps. None triggered. It seemed the dead had no more enemies here. In the central archive chamber, he found it. A shard, transparent and multifaceted, like a frozen tear, floated inside a stasis cradle. When he stepped closer, it rotated to face him. Light poured through it, forming images he couldn't understand. Not yet. He reached out. The shard did not resist, but when his fingers closed around it, pain lanced through his skull. A spike of light, memory, emotion, not his own. He staggered back, breath caught in his throat. This was an echo shard, memory light. Solari minds encoded in crystalline format, used for diplomatic relay, legacy storage, even personality transference. This one shimmered with pale blue fire, alive but incomplete. Kael didn't know how to read it, but Elyra could. He cradled the shard in a fabric wrap, shielding it from the rain as he made the journey back, wounds reopening, exhaustion gnawing at the edges of his mind. She was waiting when he returned, pale, drenched in sweat, but alive. When he handed her the shard, her fingers trembled. It's keyed to Solari DNA, he warned. I couldn't open it. Maybe you can. She nodded. No words, just understanding. The moment her skin touched the shard, light poured out, and the past came roaring back. The room fell away. Time bent. Kael stood in a place not built for human eyes, corridors of liquid crystal, skies carved in starlight. Elyra's presence anchored him, her thoughts wrapped around his like twin currents. Memory became substance. Her people's final days unfolded with brutal clarity. He saw the council chambers, ambassadors arguing with human envoys, voices raised in desperation. Solari envoys begged for reconciliation. They offered treaties, technologies, peace. But fear ruled the room. A single mistake, a flare of misinterpreted energy, set off the first gun. Bullets tore through emissaries who hadn't drawn weapons. Then came the orbital strikes. Elyra had survived by accident. Her vessel misjumped. She missed the massacre by hours only to return to silence. The shard captured it all. Diplomacy betrayed. A culture annihilated not by war, but by paranoia. Kael felt her grief like a fire in his chest, her rage, her longing. Then, something shifted. She turned her gaze inward, toward him, And the bond didn't sever. It deepened. She reached into his mind, seeking the root of his will, and found it. The ruined cities, the child buried under debris, the endless walks into poison winds, not for glory, but because survival was the only act of defiance left. She saw the hunger, the stubbornness, the part of humanity that broke and still rebuilt. In that moment, something human awakened in her, not pity, respect. And in Kael, something alien stirred, a strange sense of remembrance not his own. Light, harmony, grief older than species. They returned to themselves gasping, the shard dim in her hand. Neither spoke. There was no need. It started with a flicker, barely perceptible, on a rusted interface Kael had long stopped trusting. The old comm tower, half swallowed by creeping lichen and eaten by time, let out a hollow ping. One blink, then two. Then against all odds, it surged with life. A burst of static screamed through the shelter's receiver. Kyle scrambled toward it, fingers flying across keys that groaned under pressure. The screen lit in red. Outbound transmission detected. He hadn't activated anything. Neither had Elyra. "Did you?" "No," she said, eyes narrowing. From the hillside outside, the tower's upper antenna crackled. Old servos whined as it reoriented skyward and fired a burst into the clouds. A needle of code launched toward orbit, and high above, in the roiling, acid-choked stratosphere, where human eyes couldn't see, mercenary warships stirred. They had been waiting. Aboard one, the Black Albatross, systems blinked awake. Auto-targeting arrays mapped trajectory. Biological scans aligned with a signature they'd been paid handsomely to extinguish. Solari Psionic. The ships moved. Engines hummed. Hulls split the upper fog. Unseen wings casting shadows no sun pierced. Their orders were simple, no survivors. They sat in silence beneath the curve of the shelter's dome, Elyra's hands resting on the dim echo shard. Kael still breathless from the jolt of the last memory bond. But something else lingered, something unfinished. He'd felt it too, her presence brushing against the darker corners of his mind, places he kept walled away, until now. "Show me," she whispered. Kael hesitated, but he didn't resist. A moment later she saw it. Fire, blood, a boy huddled beneath broken steel, his brother, taller, stronger, dragging him through gunfire. Not just any battle, a Solari front line. And above, a black-helmed figure firing into the air, shouting orders in a tongue she recognized as her own. Then, silence. The brother's body shielding Kael's from a collapsing beam. Elyra flinched. "I didn't know," Kael said hoarsely. "He fought. Maybe he killed your people. I don't know. I just ran." But Elyra's expression wasn't anger. She reached back, her mind slipping open like a tide drawn to moonlight. And Kael glimpsed her past. Twin suns arcing above crystalline towers. Children with luminous skin chasing vapor lights through marble gardens. A council chamber where she, too young for the role, stood tall as her father laid his ceremonial sword at her feet. Firstborn commander of the Dawn Guard. And finally of the order that changed everything. Not to strike, to wait, to hope. 2 worlds, 2 children, 2 burdens neither had asked for, and now 2 names etched in acid. The first gunship screamed overhead before they had even packed. Kyle shoved supplies into his satchel, hand locked around a rusted sidearm, already moving. Elyra followed, armor hissing as it reassembled around her limbs, though it flickered at the joints. Too damaged to hold in a full combat profile. Through the shelter's viewport, he glimpsed the sleek silhouette of a merc craft slicing through storm clouds. Black hull, no insignia. "Eyes in the sky," he muttered, "means boots on the ground." "Not just any boots," Elyra said, jaw tight. "Purge teams." They ran. The rust wastes lived up to their name. Ridges of oxidized metal, sinkholes that swallowed sound and bone, abandoned machinery from wars no one remembered. Elyra moved like a shadow, all precision and grace. Kael, rougher, louder, ducked and dodged, relying on instinct honed by desperation. Shelters came and went. A buried tram station where they caught breath. a wind-crippled outpost where they found water and a corpse. One by one, each became a battlefield. At the third shelter, they heard boots. 6 figures, armored, no emblems. The language they spoke had no vowels. Mercenary dialect. Kael fired first. Elyra followed with a psionic blast that crumpled a wall. They ran before the echoes died. Each step forward bred more friction. Elyra wanted to stand, to fight with honor. Kael spat curses. Honor doesn't patch bullet holes. She moved in arcs, flanking, planning. He bulldozed through, scavenging grenades from corpses and setting traps as they fled. They screamed at each other once, mid-run, mid-blood, mid-panic. But when another gunship dropped fire on their trail, it was Kael who threw himself over her. When she looked up, his coat was scorched through, but he still held her hand. The vault doors groaned open with the weight of the dead. Ancient Solari architecture, more grown than built, formed organic curves and pulsing light veins. The place breathed. Elyra stepped inside as if walking into a tomb. "This was sacred," she said, voice a hush. A place where thought was stored. The mind vault Kael followed, scanning for traps. Inside, glass-like columns stood in spirals. Each contained a flickering shape, memory specters suspended in luminous gel. Elyra's fingers brushed one. It flared. Suddenly, Kael saw it, not with his eyes but his mind. Elyra, in regal armor, facing human envoys at a floating embassy over Earth. She spoke peace, her voice calm but urgent. The humans responded, not with words but weapons. One fired. A memory ripple. The Solari guards raised their psionics too late. Kael reeled, gasping. Elyra unlocked another. She stood before the Solari High Council. They burned with fear. Some wanted war. Others fled. She alone argued for patience against the surge of vengeance. Her voice cracked, but she didn't waver. More memories cascaded. Solari children ushered into cryopods. Elyra watching a final sunrise. The vote to dismantle the last orbital weapon, lost by one. Kael fell to his knees. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Because it's not just history," she said. "It's who I am. And if I fall, it dies too." The light in the vault dimmed, but inside him the echoes remained. They found the remains in the heart of the vault. Burned robes, cracked crowns of crystal once worn by diplomats. Elyra knelt among them, her armor dimming out of reverence. She picked up a shattered insignia, an ambassador's sigil. "They begged me to authorize a final strike," she whispered. "To make humanity pay, to finish what your kind started." Kael waited. "I said no." She closed her fist around the insignia. "I believed peace could rise from grief. I thought, if one side refused the cycle, the other would follow." Kael knelt beside her. "What happened?" "We were erased," she said, "and peace died with us." He didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a wrapped cloth. Inside, cleaned and silent, lay a Solari blade he'd scavenged earlier. Not functional, but intact. "I think peace needs sharper teeth." She looked at him. Really looked. For the first time, her eyes didn't seem alien. They seemed tired, strong, alone. And in that moment, something shifted again. Not in memory, not in mission, but in presence. Not just survivor to survivor, but soul to soul. The clouds split again, brighter this time. Kael's sensor pinged 12 signatures. Too close. He didn't have time to think. "Go," he said. "I'll catch up." "I'm not leaving." He pulled a flare from his belt and fired it east. Then another, west. 2 decoy trails. The fires caught instantly, chemical accelerants igniting rusted trees and shattered plastics in towering blazes. "You want to save your people's memory?" he asked. "Then move." She ran. Kael led the mercs a hard chase, through gorges, over scrap bridges, into mines so old even rats had abandoned them. One by one they followed him, splitting to flank. He dropped charges, collapsed a wall, vanished into smoke. But it cost him. By the time he reached the rendezvous point, bleeding from a thigh wound and half-blinded by ash, she wasn't there. Panic surged. Then he saw her, crawling, dragging herself. A plasma bolt had torn through her side, burned deep. She tried to stand, collapsed again. Kael didn't hesitate. He lifted her with one arm, his body screaming in protest. In his other hand, the Solari blade pulsed faintly with her DNA in proximity, half alive. Behind them, fire raged. Before them, only black horizon. They walked into it together. They reached the Solari monolith under a bruised sky, jagged stone rising like a blade from the acid plains, stained with centuries of corrosion and silence. It was supposed to be sanctuary. Kael helped Elyra climb the last slope, her steps faltering, blood seeping through her armor's fractured seals. The entrance stood like a wound in the spire's side, half sealed but open enough to promise safety. But safety had always been a lie. The first shot seared past Kael's head, exploding against the stone in a spray of heat and light. Then another. The ambush had waited for them, mercenaries embedded in the cliff face, camo-cloaked and silent as wraiths. Kael dove for cover, dragging Elyra with him. Plasma bolts peppered the rock, shattering shards in blinding flashes. He returned fire blindly, ducking behind ancient consoles now hollowed by time. Elyra tried to stand, her psionic field flaring like a last gasp. Then they were surrounded. 4 shapes emerged from the smoke, armor blackened, visors glowing. The leader stepped forward, weapon raised. Kael moved to shield Elyra. She beat him to it. With the last reserve of her strength, Elyra threw a shimmering wall between them and the onslaught. The air rippled. Plasma hit the field and dispersed, but each impact drove her backward, her shield flickering, faltering. And then, she collapsed. The mercs advanced. Kael screamed, not in rage but terror, and hurled himself over her fallen form. The world narrowed to fire. He crawled with her toward the monolith's heart, dragging her body through cracked stone and flickering glyphs. Her breathing was shallow, skin pale as moonlight. The spire pulsed weakly, long dormant, barely alive, but something within still functioned. An interface, hidden beneath a shattered altar, came to life at his touch. Symbols glowed. A psionic conduit flickered. It hadn't been meant for humans. But Kael wasn't thinking. He pressed Elyra's palm to the center. The interface rejected it. Not enough life. Not enough signal. So he did the only thing he could. He pressed his own hand beside hers. The spire screamed. A psionic surge shot through both of them, shorting circuits, sparking old nerves. Pain cracked through his skull like thunder. Her body jolted beneath his, spasming once. Then silence. And darkness. Then connection. Not words, not thoughts. Just being. Kael felt her fading life force like a thread unspooling in fire. He saw her, himself, and something more. The border between identities bled away. Her pain became his. His memories colored hers. Her hope, the one she never voiced, danced beside his guilt. It wasn't peace. It was fusion. And it burned like rebirth. The connection became a world. He stood beneath twin suns, warm wind brushing his face. It wasn't Earth. It was her home. Once. Before the ruin. Before war. Crystal towers shimmered in the horizon. Gardens floated in midair, vines pulsing with light. Children ran past him, laughing in a language he couldn't understand but somehow felt. Elyra stood nearby, cloaked in ceremonial armor, eyes downcast as the sun set. This was her memory, perfectly preserved, her last walk through the sky garden before she left for Earth. Before diplomacy turned to betrayal, Kael approached her. She didn't turn. "I wasn't ready," she whispered, though no mouth moved. "I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to live." He reached out. Their hands touched. She looked up. And for a breath, the war, the deaths, the regrets, none of it mattered. What lived between them wasn't peace. It was something deeper, something neither of them had ever known, something neither language nor battle could name, a hope born not of purity, but of shared wounds. A new world began with that touch. And then, the dream cracked. Kael awoke to screaming metal and flickering light. The interface had collapsed, the altar consumed by fire. Elyra lay motionless in the center of the chamber, smoke curling around her body. He crawled to her, hands shaking. Then her eyes opened. Not gold, blue, flickering at the edges with gold light, but unmistakably his blue. Her breathing deepened, and with it came a new rhythm. Smoother, more human. Her chest pulsed with light, the heart core no longer flickering erratically. The interface had rewritten something fundamental. Her biocircuitry, once alien in pattern, now hummed with hybrid harmonics. Neural bridges forged from psionic memory and earthborn synapse structure. The impossible had occurred. She wasn't just revived. She had changed. Elyra sat up slowly, limbs cracking with reformation. Her armor glowed, new lines etched across its surface. Neither Solari nor human. A fusion. Kael watched, unsure whether to speak or kneel. "I felt you," she said, voice lower, heavier, no longer perfectly melodic. "I am you, and more." Her gaze met his. "Solari are gone," she said, "but I am not." Then, as if answering some invisible rite, she reached behind her and drew the blade Kael had carried. It sang when it touched her palm. The glyphs on the chamber walls shifted, recognizing the new pattern. Not Solari, not human. Both. She stood, unsteady but defiant, and the spire responded. The lights pulsed once. Then all around them, dormant systems powered on. Not with the past, with something born from now. They emerged from the spire hours later, the acid rain thinning into gentle mist. The clouds parted slightly, enough to let down rays that burned less than before. Kael moved with a limp. Elyra steadied him. They said nothing for a while. Below them the canyon sprawled, twisted metal and scorched earth. But beneath it, movement. The vines moved again. Insects returned, life creeping through death. She stopped at the cliff's edge and unlatched the remnants of her breastplate. "I was Elyra of the Solari," she said, "chosen of the council, keeper of the treaty flame." She let the plate fall into the canyon. "No longer." Kael turned toward her. "Then who are you now?" She thought for a moment. "Elyra Sovereign." The name echoed, not from bloodline, not from heritage, but from will, a declaration. Kael smiled, and for the first time, the rain did not sting his skin. It cooled it. The canyon wall loomed tall beside them, jagged, blackened. Elyra stepped forward and drew the blade. She carved the first half of the sigil into the stone, a radiant spiral, the Solari mark of awakening. Kael followed with his sidearm, carefully scratching the second half. 3 interlocking rings, earth glyph for resistance, rebirth, and defiance. The combined symbol burned faintly in the mist, a warning, a promise, and a beginning. They stood in silence. Somewhere far above, satellites passed in orbit. Some held enemies, others, watchers. None mattered now. Kael looked at her. "We don't have a flag," he said. "No," she agreed, "but we have fire." They turned, rain trailing from their coats and armor. Ahead lay a world still hostile. Behind, ruins, ghosts, and ash. But between them, a future neither side had dared to dream. 2 against the sky, and they would not fall quietly. The wind screamed like a dying god as Kael and Elyra descended into the heart of the ice wastes. Beneath the glacier's jagged surface, hidden under layers of acidic frost and tectonic scars, rose the last archive tower. It wasn't dead, not entirely. Crystalline structures pulsed faintly beneath the ice, casting spectral light across the jagged tunnels. The tower had once stood tall above a fertile plain, now buried like everything Solari. They entered through a collapsed side gate, stepping into silence so profound it vibrated through their bones. Inside, the air was dry, the stone warm, the corridors lit by bioluminescent circuits that pulsed like heartbeats. Data spirits hovered near the walls, psionic echoes left by long-dead Solari archivists. They drifted silently, observing, whispering. Not in language, but in emotion. Sorrow, regret, guilt. Elyra paused at a glyph-covered pillar and placed her palm upon it. The tower responded. Her vision flooded with memories. Children born into embassies, elders weaving peace treaties from light, entire fleets grounded in protest against war. And finally, the stillness of waiting. Waiting, extinction. The weight of it shattered something inside her. These ghosts had not died in battle. They had died in patience. A peace that became a grave. Kael watched her stagger, face pale. She didn't cry, but her silence screamed. Deep within the archive's core, they found the truth. A sealed chamber opened beneath their feet, descending into a vault untouched since before Earth even discovered faster-than-light travel. Inside, data pylons hummed with dormant fire. Elyra activated the central node, and a projection bloomed above them. A galaxy-wide map, a weapons design, the Solari's final failsafe. It was not a bomb, nor a virus, nor any crude death machine. It was silence, a psionic resonance wave, tuned to unravel sentient thought across the galaxy. No blood, no fire, just forgetting. An engineered amnesia that would erase entire species. It would have ended all war, because nothing that remembered would remain. Kael backed away, skin crawling. Why didn't they use it? He asked. The answer unfolded in light and song. A council chamber, elders in radiant robes, Elyra's ancestors. One by one they voted, not to fire, to delete the weapon's code. They chose extinction over wielding such power. Elyra dropped to her knees, hands trembling. Her people hadn't died because they were weak. They had died because they were merciful. Kael's fists clenched. Peace doesn't mean anything if it ends in ashes, he growled. Elyra didn't disagree, but she understood. Explosions cracked the vault walls before the alarms did. The archive moaned, ancient structures trembling. The mercs had found them. Dropships slammed into the upper tiers. Troops poured in, metal boots crushing old glyphs. The tower, sensing intrusion, awakened its last defense. Psionic fire surged through its walls. The corridors twisted, shimmered. The very air turned traitor. Kael staggered as the hallway around him dissolved into images. Earth's ruins, his brother's grave, the scent of burning rain. Illusions layered over reality, blending memory and nightmare. He fought with fists, blade, instinct, against soldiers who were sometimes real and sometimes himself. Elsewhere, Elyra wandered through blood-soaked gardens. The ghosts of her kin surrounded her. They didn't scream, they judged. Children, elders, her commander, each a memory of trust shattered, each a fragment of love lost. She tried to speak to them, but their eyes had no forgiveness. She fell, gasping, drowning in echoes. Kael found her, pulled her out. Their hands burned as they clasped, psionic wards flaring. Reality reformed around them, and so did resolve. The core chamber was circular, vast and silent. It pulsed faintly with the data of a people who no longer existed. Kael and Elyra reached it moments before the mercs breached the inner sanctum. Behind them, death. Ahead, decision. The archive's control system flickered. The weapon design was gone, erased centuries ago. But the core memory, the truth of Solari peace, still lived here. If the mercs got it, if they twisted it, reprogrammed it, it would become something monstrous, a new weapon. Kael approached the failsafe switch. The controls were familiar now. Solari and human code had merged within him. He could do it, wipe it all. Every last echo, every last history. Wait, Elyra said, barely standing. If you destroy this, there's nothing left. Not even remembrance. Kael's jaw clenched. They'll weaponize it. They'll erase everything. Again. Her voice cracked. Then let them remember what we chose. Not power, not destruction, but restraint. He looked into her eyes, saw not a soldier, not a survivor, but a soul, the last Solari, and something more. What if forgetting is safer, he asked. What if fighting is worth remembering, she answered. And in that moment, he understood. Kael keyed the override. The archive's core let out a high, keening tone, like a requiem sung by stars. The glyphs across the walls flared one last time, burning white. Then the tower began to collapse. He grabbed Elyra, carried her as the world fell in behind them. Fire and light roared through ancient halls. Ghosts screamed in silence. The ice cracked. The acid rain steamed. As they burst through a lower exit, half crawling, half falling, The structure behind them detonated. The sky turned gold. Not from hope, from memory, dying. They rolled to safety as debris showered around them. The archive, once a citadel of knowledge, mercy, and grief, was now nothing but glowing ash in a frozen crater. Elyra looked back, tears searing tracks through dust on her cheeks. "They're gone," she whispered. Kael didn't answer, because something inside him hadn't gone. Not entirely. Later, beneath a makeshift shelter stitched from tarp and prayer, Kael sat in silence. Elyra slept beside him, her breath shallow but steady. He stared at his hand, turned it over. Again. Again. Then he reached to the back of his neck and tapped a point just beneath the skin. A faint glow answered. The backup had worked. The psionic link, forged in fire and unity, had embedded something deep in his spine. Not weapon schematics, not strategies. A memory strand. One thread of the Solari archive. Not enough to rebuild their empire, but enough to remember why it had chosen to die. He said nothing to Elyra. He didn't need to. When she awoke and looked into his eyes, the flicker of gold in their blue told her everything. The Solari were gone, but one memory survived, and that was enough. The news traveled slowly, like ash on a still breeze. The archive was gone. The mercenary armada scattered, burned, hunted by their own contractors for failure. Surveillance nets caught final bursts of ion flare and shattered comm logs, then nothing. Silence. Kael and Elyra were presumed dead. No body, no transmission, no trace. Across fractured human outposts, from the orbital rings of broken Mars to the damp halls of Europa's sink cities, there was no celebration, only pause, reflection, a moment where conflict did not advance, and in distant alien enclaves where surviving races watched humanity with weary caution, whispers stirred through fungal archives and crystalline memory nodes. They spoke not of victory, not of defeat, but of final choices. The destruction of the archive sent ripples into the dark. For once, war held its breath, and in the gap, peace, raw, tentative, and uncertain, began to grow like lichen on metal. Kael stood barefoot on glass-smooth stone, staring at a red-black sky streaked with aurora fragments. Their moon wasn't on any map. A rogue satellite, coated in rare acid-hardened quartz and orbiting a long-dead star, abandoned by charts, untouched by war. The storms couldn't touch it. The satellites ignored it. They called it severance, not for escape, but because it marked the line between what was and what must come next. Elyra had chosen the site. Her fingers traced ancient Solari constellations on the fractured star field above. Where others saw death, she saw foundation, and they began to build. From Earth, scorched metal, repurposed engines, rusted steel lattices. From Solari ruins, psionic relays, glass veins pulsing with pale blue light, self-repairing circuits that responded to thought. The towers rose like memory shards, fused in style but divergent in soul. Gardens grew beneath solar-stained domes, their roots fed by ionized nutrients. Psionic sun lamps danced over hybrid vines, a sanctuary not meant for hiding, a seed vault for ideas, for peace, for tomorrow. It began one night in silence. Elyra collapsed, again, but not from injury. Her body glowed faintly, veins laced with shifting light. Kael rushed her to the med chamber, panicked. Systems blinked with uncertain warnings, biocircuitry rewriting itself at the molecular level. Not a malfunction, a transformation. The neural splicing they had shared, the psionic merge that saved her heart core, had initiated something deeper. Genetic exchange, a hybridization event. Solari bioarchitecture wove itself around Kael's human genome, embedded in her cells. The result was something new, not a mutation, not a fusion, an awakening. When she emerged from the biostasis cocoon, her skin shimmered with softened silver, eyes a calm storm blue shot through with Solari gold. Her breath came easier, her thoughts clearer, her smile wider. She laughed, a sound Kael hadn't heard from her before. Elyra Sovereign no longer described her, but Prototype didn't either. This wasn't just about evolution. This was about starting over, with no blueprint but what they believed in. They wrote it on a stone slab first, because old things carry weight. Later, it would be digitized and etched into Solari glass and cast in recycled metal. But the first version lived in scratches and pauses. A scavenger's hand and a diplomat's voice. Two minds reshaped by ruin, declaring what they would not become. The Kael Accord had no flag, no anthem, only a beginning. Let the last war end with us. It was neither treaty nor constitution. It was a promise. 10 tenets, carved not from political necessity, but raw survival. Memory as the first law, empathy as the second, shared ancestry, regardless of origin, as the third. Fourth, no archive survives without witnesses. Fifth, no weapon is born without shared consent. The rest unfolded in a quiet rhythm of hope, boundary, and warning. At the base of the slab, they carved a new sigil, half Solari, half human. Entwined, not divided, the accord would not be broadcast. It would be found by those who needed it most. It happened without fanfare, just a shift in the wind, a thinning of clouds. The acid storm stilled. Kael and Elyra stood together on the sanctuary's highest platform, a disk of glass and alloy suspended above the gardens, the towers, the memory pools below. Their armor, once scorched and battered, was now worn smooth by effort and time, still marked by conflict, but whole. Kael squinted up. Beyond the haze of ion fog, a sliver of violet crept over the horizon. Not quite sunrise, not quite starlight. A new color. A color the war had never known. Elyra reached out, threading her fingers through his. Her hand was warmer now, less metal, more alive. "This is the only fight worth having," she said. He nodded, silent. No explosions marked this dawn, no victory march, no anthem, just them, standing on the bones of the past, choosing to build instead of break. The light touched their faces, not from a superweapon, not from a starship reactor, but from something more terrifying, more sacred. Hope.